My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email, and all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about it?
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on this show. We tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, thus the name of our show, Redacted. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the border, which a lot of it has been redacted. The government doesn't want you to know what's actually unfolding there. And we've got the team from Muckraker who went on the full journey, documenting every step of the way. Where are these illegal migrants coming from? What countries are they coming from? How are they actually getting to the United States by the tens of thousands? The answer may surprise you, but we're going to dive deeply into this entire journey tonight here on the show.
Plus, we're going to talk about climate change because the World Economic Forum is still happening this week, and they are doubling down on climate, but they are omitting all kinds of data points. Isn't that convenient? We're going to talk about all of the politics around climate science, which should not be inserted into the science at all.
Also, we've gotten word from the mother of one of the Israeli soldiers who was captured. She has learned the truth about how her son has been killed. And what do we make of the other soldiers, the other hostages that are being held right now? Benjamin Netanyahu coming out and saying he will continue this war in Gaza until at least 2025. So that's what we have to look forward to. We'll dive into that today on the show, plus so much more as Redacted starts right now.
All right, welcome to your Thursday. This is the end of the week, and the World Economic Forum in Davos is wrapping up the globalist Coachella, as it is known. It's kept us really busy watching what the globalist agenda is for all of us, and then maybe poking some holes in it if we want to. Now, recall, Clayton, the theme at Davos this year was rebuilding trust.
Rebuilding trust, yeah.
I would just like to gauge where they have made any progress on that. So before this, how much did you trust the Davos globalists?
I mean, I didn't trust them at all. In fact, I think they are 0. 0 being the worst. I think they're demons.
Okay, all right. And now?
Now I want to build a bunker and stay even further away from these people.
You're in the negative.
I mean, I just want to think about the laundry list of shit that they've been talking about. Climate, right? We want to get rid of meat. That was on the agenda, right? We want to get rid of meat.
We want you to live with less.
Want you to live with less. We want to roll out central bank digital currencies. Misinformation is the greatest threat to humanity. We heard that this week at Davos. Ecocide. If you are engaged in fishing, then you are involved in ecocide, not genocide, but ecocide. And farming, you're an ecocider. You're a homicider. I mean, the list is endless.
Okay, Philip, let's do one of those how it started, how it's going memes. How it started, your trust in Davos globalists?
Let's see. After all the coverage from last year, I think I was starting this year out at about I'd say a -5, a good -5. Okay. And then after the WEF math fiasco after yesterday that we talked about, and them sort of like rebranding GDP, I'd say I'm at a good -15 at this point.
Okay.
You don't mess with math.
Better than me. All right. So you went in the negatives right out of the gate. I started with 0 and went negative. So yeah, let us know in the chat room. What do you guys think?
Yeah, where you started and where it's going. Where are you now? Have they rebuilt your trust? Is anyone in the positive figures that yes, this year is better? They've built a little bit back, especially after the disease X. The pandemic they want to roll out on us that they don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, unbelievable data on that coming out too. We're going to speak with Dr. William Makis next week here on the show because this disease X, there's a lot of troubling documentation and data on that, which we'll get to next week on the show. And we're going to talk about the crisis at the border here in a moment. We've got the team from muckraker.com who just got back. In fact, they were kidnapped on this journey. They were kidnapped, held at gunpoint. We're going to tell you about their harrowing journey. They're going to join us here in just moments here on the show. We're really excited to hear about that and what's actually happening at the southern border because the mainstream media will not cover this story. But first, we want to tell you about our newsletter, which you can get. It's totally free. We'd love for you to subscribe. All the kids are doing it. And again, last night we had about 820 of you sign up for the free newsletter. So, hey, welcome to the new 820 of you last night who signed up. It's totally free. We don't ever sell your information. You just receive a great newsletter every day right into your inbox. We cover about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, things you might have missed while you were sleeping. In fact, we had in there this morning in the newsletter the story about Arnold Schwarzenegger being detained by the German government as he landed from his flight because he had a luxury watch that he, I guess, just didn't mention to customs about it. So they held him for 3 hours. Now they're filing criminal procedures against him for tax problems.
You know what? I would have loved to hear all that back and forth German. I don't know. When I watched the Arnold documentary on Netflix, I'm like, speak more German. I want to hear.
Well, I would love to be. Can you imagine being the customs guy who literally detained Arnold Schwarzenegger? You're like the most unpopular man now.
You got to think.
Yeah. Like you walk around Austria, you walk around those areas, they love Schwarzenegger. You're the guy that detained Schwarzenegger, you little punk. Anyway, so that was in the newsletter this morning. So you can sign up. It's totally free. Go to redacted.inc. Sign up for it. It'll be delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning. We publish it Monday through Thursday. So Monday morning, you'll get the latest edition of it. Again, redacted.inc. Well, tens of thousands of illegal immigrants are pouring across the United States southern border on a daily basis. Yes, it is an invasion of the United States, but where does it start? How does it unfold? Well, the team from muckraker.com decided to find out. Take a look.
In 2023, nearly 250,000 illegal aliens entered the United States every month. Nearly all of these illegals followed the same mass migration trail that starts in Quito, Ecuador, and ends at the U.S. southern border. So, we decided to follow the trail ourselves. Along the way, we discovered secret Chinese staging hotels, crossed through the world's deadliest jungle, embedded with an illegal alien caravan, rode the Mexican train of death, and finally were kidnapped by the Gulf Cartel, just hundreds of feet from the United States border.
That's part of a brand new documentary from the team at muckraker.com, and I'm joined by the team that put it together, Josh Rubin and Anthony Rubin, brothers, who followed the exact route and the invasion from start to finish, and they join me now. Guys, nice to see you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well, man. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you. And this is an incredibly hard story to follow. You're going through jungles. You're going through raging waters. This is not an easy story. It's why so few journalists have actually uncovered this story. What made you decide to follow this invasion from the very beginning?
Yeah, so we were I think I've told you this. I came on your show. We actually had a document that said, hey, this is the Chinese plan to get to America. We start in Quito, Ecuador. We go through all these different countries, and then we wind up at the U.S. southern border. And there was just a PDF document that I was sent from a Chinese illegal alien in the Darien Gap. And so that had just been on my mind. It's like, why don't we just go follow the whole thing? I don't know that anybody's ever done that. And so that's exactly what we did. And to my knowledge, we're the first people to do it. There was some other YouTuber who went through the Darien Gap and rode the train of death. But other than, he didn't really get into the NGOs that run it or the United Nations plan behind it. And that's what we talk about in the video, like the whole blueprint, the whole plan behind the thing, as well as obviously taking you through the trail. So it's really one of a kind. I don't think anybody has ever done anything quite like it.
Our friend of the show, Michael Yon, of course, former Green Beret, excellent investigative journalist, has really been in the Darien Gap in Panama for a number of months, and of course cataloging and providing at least routes and passage for individuals to see where the Darien Gap leads to the United States. But you went even further than that and got into some really dangerous situations. Can you talk about, well, give us an example of where you really ran into danger, and did you fear for your lives?
Josh, go for it.
Well, do you mean in the Darien Gap or in the entire journey? Because, I mean, obviously we got kidnapped at the end of it. We had to sleep on top of moving trains. But as far as the Darien Gap goes, we crossed through, there's 3 routes to cross through the Darien Gap, Corretto, Copper Gana, and Akandi. We went through Corretto, which is the safest of the 3 routes. But it's still very dangerous. You know, you can still get a waterborne illness. He ended up actually getting E. coli and salmonella, which, you know, could have easily been from, you know, the Darien Gap, drinking some contaminated water. There's people walking around with machetes and guns and rifles, whatnot. So it's definitely a dangerous situation. And if anything happens to you in that jungle, no one's gonna come save you, and it's completely lawless. You know, there's no police or anything like that. So It's definitely a dangerous situation. And another thing, like you could see in the video, it's basically all mud. So if you're somehow get trapped in that jungle, there's a high percent chance that you might get trench foot and die because you're walking around sludging through mud all day. That's like a big reason like people can't make it through. So yeah.
Well, and we've seen horrible videos, of course, of bodies just washing up because of heavy rainfall. They can't make it through rivers and waterways in the jungle. So people are dying on a regular basis on this journey.
Oh, yeah. We didn't see any on our particular route that we took because it, like Josh said, it's a shorter one. It's the one that a lot of the special interest aliens use, the ones that have a little bit more money, because you actually get smuggled into Panama by boat, like on the coast of Panama, and then you walk inland from there. So it's a 2-day trek. But even on that one, because you also have these native guides that take you through. So it's much safer than if you go through Colombia into Panama, which is just, total lawlessness over there. But even on this shorter trek, we were told that there are bodies on this one, but just right now there were none because it was the rainy season. They had all been washed away. But yeah, man, there's bodies all throughout that jungle. It's pretty serious.
Well, Josh, you mentioned, of course, being kidnapped. I was getting dispatches from mutual friends of ours who were letting me know, oh my gosh, Anthony and Josh, they've just been kidnapped on their trek as they're trying to catalog all of this. And I said, oh my God, I hope they're safe. Thank God you guys were. Can you talk about what happened and what part of this journey you were kidnapped?
Yeah, so it was right at the end of the journey. It was actually exactly a month long. At the very end, we were like, okay, we're going to complete this thing by crossing the U.S. southern border right at the most southeastern point of Texas. So we were walking up this public beach called La Playa, Baghdad. It's about an 8-mile walk. We're maybe 3 miles into the walk. And then a truck picks us up. I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version. They basically tell us that if you keep going down this beach, they're going to have some serious problems for you. And then they pick us up in this truck.
They lay out all our stuff. So we got picked up by this truck, and they wouldn't because they wouldn't let us go down to the end of this beach for whatever reason. And we wanted to keep going. They're like, you can't do it because if you do it, there's going to be troubles for you. But we just can't let you go. And so we get into this truck and they start driving us back. Basically, I'm giving you the spark notes. Like I said, you can watch the whole documentary to see the whole thing because it's a long story. But we start driving back. They hand us off. And we thought we were just going to, hey, they'll just drop us off at the beginning of the beach. We'll be good. They transfer us into a truck with 3 other armed men. Okay, like the first truck, they weren't armed. They basically order us out of the truck. They pull up next to the truck and they start barking at us, like, get out and get into this other truck with 3 armed men. These armed men pick us up, drive us inland, and then they lay out all of our stuff, like Josh said. And they see our drone and our camera and start flipping out. And again, just to give you the long story short, put us on our knees, take hostage type photos of us. They got Josh pinned up against the truck. They point to my drone at one point. One of the guys points to my drone, holds a pistol to his head. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening right now? They tie up our hands. They blindfold me because I was wearing a bandana. They use it as a blindfold. They didn't have one for Josh, so they pull the hood over his head, like in the back of a car. They shove us back there. There's an armed man sitting next to us. There's 2 armed guys in the front, and then we just start driving out through Mexico. And they're just making stops. We're smoking pot in the car. They're on the walkie-talkie saying that we're part of an investigación. We're going to see El Jefe. And I keep saying, I'm like, tell us how much money you want. How much, we'll stop at an ATM. I don't care. What do you want? $1,000, $2,000? Like, no. Like, investigación El Jefe. We're going to see El Jefe. I'm like, oh my God. Eventually the truck stops and we're in the middle of literally smack dab of an abandoned field. Like, there's nowhere to run. And I have no idea why I would be in an abandoned field if they're not going to put a bullet in our head. And so we we're ordered out of the truck. And I was like, I don't know what we're doing here, but this does not look good. But what they did is they took all of our electronic gear. They laid it right out in front of us and they start screaming at us because they don't believe that they have all the gear and they want every last bit of our electronic equipment. And they actually didn't have all the gear. We still had our GoPro, which they didn't find. It was like a kind of a hidden compartment in the bag. So if you guys see the documentary, you'll see there's some GoPro footage actually right before we got picked up that they didn't get, which is kind of cool. It's like the last footage that we have from that trip we still have. But anyway, so then they take out a crowbar and they smash everything we have. And they left nothing to chance. There was bits and pieces and they smashed the bits and pieces, load us up onto a truck and drop us off at the port of entry and basically tell us never come back again. And that's what happened, man. But, 2 Americans were killed by the same cartel just about a year ago in that same exact area. So, these are serious dudes, man. And, I think that we were lucky to get out of there with, just losing our gear.
Yeah, I would say so. Let's talk about who you saw on this journey besides the kidnappers. Let's talk about the migrants, the thousands of migrants we see in this documentary walking down the street, just like a flood of individuals pouring into the United States. Where are they coming from?
Well, a lot of them were coming from China. When we went down there, this whole migrant trail we got from a Chinese illegal alien in the first place. And as soon as you start off in Quito, you can see like straight from the get-go, there's like, a bunch of, Chinese that are already down there. And as you go up, I mean, it basically confirmed the whole thing for us. Like as you can see in the documentary, there's literally Chinese staging points, hotels that specifically house Chinese illegal aliens going up to the United States. So that's like the first important thing is, I would say, I mean, based on what I saw, like 50%, I mean, I don't want to throw out exact numbers, but a lot of Chinese illegal aliens are coming up to the United States. And the reason why this is important is because, we are like enemies with China. So, you have all these people from China coming up to the United States. A lot of them are good people, but even if it's a small percentage of them that have sinister intentions, that are spies, that are undercover police officers that are coming up, if there's ever a conflict or dispute between the United States and China, and you have all these people that are here from that are spies from China, that could be,
or saboteurs or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And not only that, and then obviously you have Venezuelans, Ecuadorians, Colombians, people from that part of the world that are already right there, situated next to the gap. And then other than that, you got special interest aliens, man. You got Syrians coming up. Syria, that's an incredibly sketchy country. We got no idea who these men are. You'll see a clip in that video of just these Syrian men that are walking up to the camp, and all military aged, all wearing the same gear, just marching in unison up to the camp. I mean, they look like they're military. A bunch of people from Afghanistan as well. When we got to Mexico, there were tons of military aged men from countries like Sierra Leone. Everybody and anybody is coming up here, man. So, I mean, you name the country, and I'm sure we ran into it.
What about, I mean, we heard quite a bit recently about Hezbollah. Did you run into any that you knew were specifically from Hezbollah? Or Hamas?
No, but I guess, no, that would be incredible if we knew it was specifically that they were from there. However, like I was saying with those Syrian men, I mean, I'll give you a little backstory. Like when you guys see the documentary, you'll see that there's one area where I filmed these men walking up to a camp. I don't know how many of you that were in that group that I filmed, maybe like 10 or so, okay? And I had actually run into this group beforehand, before we actually entered the jungle. And these were all men that claimed to be from Syria. And I met them basically right on the outskirts of the jungle before we had gone in. And these men get off of a boat, right, a smuggling boat, to take them to the staging point in Panama. And all these men, again, claiming to be from Syria, all get off the boat. They're all wearing crucifix necklaces. And a lot of them have brand new tattoos that say Jesus, and all the tattoos look identical. So, I mean, listen, this is all kind of anecdotal. And then they find out, they're talking to me, and they're really suspicious. And then when they find out I'm an American, they want nothing to do with me. And they get real hostile when they realize that I have a camera and then I'm filming things. So look, this is all anecdotal stuff, but you tell me why a bunch of Syrian men are getting off a smuggling boat, every single one of them wearing crucifixes, almost like they were trying to cover something up. And some of them have tattoos that say Jesus with this same exact font. To me, it seems slightly suspicious. Let's just put it lightly. Okay. Like they could be covering something up. And even if those guys were nothing, I'm sure men like them are associated with Hezbollah or Hamas and are coming up here probably today.
Well, there's a long history of people using religion as cover, right? I mean, just go back through, read your history books, right? So you're not wrong in wondering what is going on here with that at all. It's pretty remarkable. What are these people telling you? Other than they're mad to see a camera and they don't want to be filmed, you probably had a lot of interactions with these people coming up all the way through this passage. What are they saying about why they're coming?
I'll say this. It's not you're not hearing these profound stories. I'm sure some of them might have a profound story, but usually it's the same thing. It's like, we want to get to the United States for a better life. You know what I mean? El mejor vida. It's the same thing for most of these people. And then some of the people from China, maybe they'll tell you that they're trying to flee oppression. Clearly with the Chinese, I mean, there's so clearly spies and saboteurs coming up. Clearly, I mean, it's so evident.
Every person we asked who's Chinese, is there Chinese police living in the United States? Are there Chinese spies living in the United States? Every single person we asked who is Chinese, all of them said yes.
Yeah.
So take that for what you will.
We include a clip in there where we ask a Chinese member, like, are there Chinese police in the U.S.? And he uses his translator. He said, yeah, there are. We didn't even include, there were other Chinese we talked to that we got on video. We didn't put in. There was no place to put it. The documentary was already so long. That confirmed on camera. They're like, we asked them, like, are there Chinese spies going up to the U.S.? He's like, of course there are. What are you talking about? So this is openly known. And the other guy, I mean, the people that are coming from Venezuela, for example, it's all the same stuff. And you guys will see in the video that, we want, Biden is promising us a better future. So we're going up to the U.S. And, not reasons to claim asylum, obviously. That's not a reason to enter the country illegally and claim to be a refugee. But, they'll get into the U.S. and they'll get a court date that's like 10 years out into the future. They'll probably be here forever, even though they don't really have a legal claim to be here.
You, of course, have covered this, and some of the reporting is that many children, of course, are being brought across the U.S.-Mexico border. And, of course, many of these children are being sold off. The child trafficking in the United States is second to none. We're leading that category. Way to go, America, for child trafficking. And many of the reports and videos that I've been seeing lately show a lot of these children clearly drugged with what they purport to be the father, but probably has no relationship to the children whatsoever. And these children laying there in their laps, drugged. They're not sleeping, they're drugged. And what did you see by way of children? And can you speak to that part of the story?
It's actually a very small part of the video that people might gloss over. We did post it separately on Twitter a while ago, but there is a woman with an infant on her shoulders that is clearly drugged out, passed out, not sleeping, because you could just tell by the way the body's just slumped over, and she's like ducking through trees and whatnot. And yeah, I'm sure that is one of countless examples of, that's just one that we saw. But they drug children and bring them up here, and a lot of times they use them as a way to get through border security either, because they can claim that it's their child.
Yeah, and to add to what Josh was saying, when we saw this lady that was carrying a drugged out child, and you'll see that in the video, on her shoulders, this lady was darting through the jungle. Like, she did not want to be seen with this kid. And so I actually had to she just darted past. I'm like, oh my God, there was an incapacitated kid in her shoulders. You see that? And she's darting through the jungle, like sprinting. And so I had to actually sprint full speed ahead and get out in front of her, pull out my camera and film her going by. And I barely did. You'll see how fast she's trekking through. And yeah, that's one of many. I mean, you see just like strange looking men that are carrying crying children through the jungle. That's also in the video. Yeah, horrible stuff, man. Horrible stuff. Kids getting trafficked from God knows where and from God knows what country, headed to God knows where, right? And who knows if they'll be heard from again, happening every day.
Putting this documentary together, have you heard from the Biden administration at all? Have you heard from members of Congress who want to use this in some capacity to hold hearings to try to put an end to this? What have you heard by way of official government response?
I don't think I understand.
That's a funny question. You know the answer to that one. Nobody's coming to us. I mean, that'd be great if they want to. Even then, even when I released, I've talked to these congressional people, right? These congressional staffers that after I came out with the child stuff, exposing these escorts that are moving kids to the airports, that got a lot of steam, right? And they call me up, and it's all talk. Even when they're interested, it's all talk. Hey, we're interested in doing something with this, and all these hours of phone calls, nothing happens. I mean, on both sides of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, it's all just a bunch of people talking. And I also, not only are they just talking, I think a lot of times these people that are supposed to be representing us, that are supposed to know what's going on, a lot of them just don't have a clue, man. And on both sides of the aisle. And that's, it's not very encouraging. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's being done in the shadows. And of course, they're always spending their time running for re-election, taking money from all these lobbying groups and special interests. And this is being funded and executed by the United States government, the child trafficking, and of course, and the marshaling of these individuals across the border. I'll get you out of here on this, guys, which is what you say in the documentary. I mean, is that this is all being executed, carried out with the help of the United States government. I mean, they're coming across the border, not on their own, but with the help of the United States government. Can you talk about those pieces that you saw along the Trail of Tears, as I'll call it?
Yeah, so the United States is essentially funding its own collapse, is what's happening. That's the really sad part. There's all these organizations that are aiding these migrants up here. It's completely organized. This isn't an organic movement. And then, they basically come up here. And also, not only is the U.S. funding its own collapse by doing that, but they're also helping cartel groups, the same cartel groups that kidnapped us, because they get money by smuggling people. So the U.S. is simultaneously helping all these people come here, destroy American sovereignty, and basically help create one-party rule in the United States, while simultaneously helping horrible cartel organizations on the way. But
let me also add this to what Josh said, so that it's explicitly clear how the U.S. is funding this. U.S. is one of the largest funders of the UN. I mean, if we backed out of the UN, it would just be a shell organization. It probably would cease to exist, at least not with any real power behind it. So we're basically the largest funder of the UN, and the UN, it has its fingers all into this thing, right? They are the ones that are handing out all these maps. I mean, we put in the video countless maps that are handed out by not only by the UN, but by the Red Cross as well. And the Red Cross gets tons of U.S. tax dollars and also donations from U.S. citizens that are thinking that they're doing good, but, they're helping, again, fund this collapse. And that's just one example. All these UN staging centers where they give them all these aid and instructions and food packages, send them up here. And so that's just a bit more just like hard, concrete evidence about how the UN's involved in this. And then just the final note is the overall agenda. People go read Agenda 2030. They could go read this other white paper called Migration and the 2030 Agenda, where it calls these people it calls quote unquote migrants. It says that they are agents of development and that we need to encourage, not stop migration for the 2030 Agenda. That's literally what the UN is saying openly. So, I mean, not only are they handing them maps and encouraging them up here, there's also a larger framework and plan up here. And everybody should read these documents that I'm talking about.
Agents of development. See, here's what happens. We go into your country, we bomb your country in Syria, and then now you're an agent of development when you come into our country and foment change in the United States. Guys, thank you so much for this. An amazing job, amazing documentary. We'll have a link in the description below for people to go check out the full documentary from Muckraker. Anthony and Josh, thank goodness you guys are safe. Thank you, and thank goodness for the great work that you've been doing. We really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Very much appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Unbelievable story, and thanks to those guys. Thanks to Anthony and Josh. We really appreciate it. So what's next? You're going to New York City and you're going to be covering that angle. I mean, you think you take some time off. They were, held at gunpoint and kidnapped on this journey, but now into the United States to see where all of those illegal aliens are winding up across the country, because the U.S. government is then ferreting them all over the country. And of course, Eric Adams in New York City is now instituting curfews for illegal immigrants.
Yes, because people are complaining about all the muggings.
Imagine that.
And sure, curfew's going to stop that. You can't mug at 10:30 and then get home.
Like, you know what? My mugging time.
I was going to mug 5 people, but I only got to 3.
Well, Eric Adams, the mayor of the city.
By WEF standards, that's just economic boons for some people. We're doing good. They're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's work. It's economic parity. They get some of yours.
Yeah, they steal some of yours.
It's equal opportunity.
They break into your company and your business. Yeah. Anyway, well, we've got more news to get to. We're going to look at the WEF and the climate BS that's been unfolding over the past few days.
Well, I don't want to call it climate BS because I want to be honest. We want to give you all sides of the science. Most of the media does not. We're going to talk about what they're leaving out on purpose.
Okay, good to hear. So we'll get there. We're also going to look at the Israeli hostage situation and what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And we're also going to look at the Hunter Biden laptop story because bombshell story from the Department of Justice. We'll get into that piece coming up. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Aura, because if you've ever looked yourself up or your family members, maybe your phone number or your email address, and realized it's being sold by data brokers, what's that doing there? Well, you could really get ahead of this if you used our friends over at Aura. They can identify data brokers exposing your information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to, but of course they make it hard for you. So let Aura handle it for you. Aura does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you can't see, so they're working behind the scenes. It's really easy to set up. You don't have to download several different apps to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft, insurance, and more. You get everything at one affordable price. So either you can let people continue to exploit and profit off of you. I don't think you want to do that. Or you can take control of your private information by going to aura.com/redacted. See that there on the screen. That's aura.com/redacted to start your 2-week free trial. Once again, that's aura.com/redacted. They are the sponsor of today's show, one of them, and we thank them so much for their support. Well, don't get excited about all these record cold temperatures. You may be freezing, but still global warming. Globalists and the World Economic Forum are afraid you might not be panicked enough about climate change, so their lackeys in the media are reporting on deep freezes, record low temperatures, snows, but they're worried that that will disrupt their climate narrative that the world is getting hotter. So they're letting us know that cold weather doesn't mean anything. Here's one example. Look at the front page of The Guardian this week. There's this freezing winter storms threaten to break records, but then look at all these climate change articles that they put on top of that, lest you think that maybe the world is not heating up. Now, if they were honest, they would tell you that there is climate change, but no scientist has definitively proven that humans or fossil fuels or carbon emissions have caused it. That has not been proven. Anyone who tells you that it has is lying. But there is a thing called climate variability, which is the natural cycles of change in the climate. I'm going to show you just a few. The media should be including this in their stories if they were honest, but they're not. Those two things are not the same. Climate change is what they call our fault, and climate variability, which happens. We do not deserve climate alarmism without hearing all sides of this. Now, am I saying global warming is not real? Well, of course not. The world has warmed since the industrial period. This is true, but there are indications that the world may be entering a cooling phase too. And what if the media was so busy scaring us about all the heat that we were collectively then not prepared for the cold? Wouldn't that be worse? Shouldn't we hear it all? So let's look at some of the things they're not showing you. For example, are you familiar with the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation?
Of course.
The AMO. Oh, really? Would you like to give me
Who isn't?
Who isn't? Yeah. Sure. The Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, that's where the ocean every 20 to 40 years variates by about a 1 degree up or down about every 40 years. Doesn't everyone know about the Atlantic oscillating? I didn't read your notes. I know this. Doesn't everyone?
Are you being sarcastic?
I am being sarcastic. I know about it, but not everyone knows about it.
Because I started talking about it this weekend because I was reading Judith
Because we were
Curry's
doing
book.
research on it this week. Yes, no one knows about this.
Okay.
Right? Yes, I know.
All right. Philip, does the average person know about the AMO? Do you talk about this over pool?
I know the AOC.
I've known about it for about 20 to 30 seconds, so
okay.
I don't know about anybody else.
So the cool kids are not talking about it yet. Okay, Clayton is correct. What it is a series of changes in ocean temperature that happens in about 20 to 40 year cycles, usually about 1 degree Celsius. What I'm showing you here is research from the NOAA Corps, the branch of the military that studies the ocean. They admit that this 1 degree shift has been occurring for at least the last millennium. Now, when you ask NOAA, is this a result of global warming? They say, well, studies have shown from paleoclimate proxies, which is a very imprecise science. I just want to throw that in there and we'll talk about that another day, that these oscillations have been observed instrumentally occurring for at least the last millennium. This is clearly longer than modern man has been affecting climate. So the AMO is probably a natural climate oscillation. They further say, though, that climate swings have camouflaged and exaggerated the effects by global warming. I'm not exactly sure what that means, that changes in ocean temperature are naturally occurring. We expect it, but it's been masked by climate change. How can that be? Do you understand? You understand? Like, we're getting what we expect, but it's being exacerbated or masked. But that doesn't make any sense. Anybody? No?
No. I mean, like, I can't. Their logic makes no sense because they're constantly trying to make their narrative work by omitting data points.
Right, but that makes no sense. If they're saying we expect every 20 to 40 years the ocean to get warmer and colder by a degree of 1, and we are seeing that, but probably there's climate change mixed in there. We can't prove it. We don't think, right? That's not a data point. Okay.
Right. And there's zero data to support it.
Yes, right.
Zero.
Another thing we should worry about is the current increase in volcanic activity. The models that the media and the World Economic Forum use to tell us about climate change are called the Coupled Model Intercomparison Project, or CMIP. I'm going to call it CMIP because that's fun. That's from the World Climate Research Program. Now, these models have a lot of variability and disagreement, but the ones that are used the most are CMIP 5 and 6. Neither of these account for solar variation. That's kind of important, right? We're talking about the sun and heat. Neither of them account for future volcanic eruptions and natural climate variability, such as the AMO. That's why scientists generally don't put a ton of confidence in these models. Politicians do. It's weird, right? Let's just isolate volcanoes for a second, okay? According to climate researcher Judith Curry, volcanoes cover about, it says the instrumental period covering the past 150 years has been relatively quiet with volcanic eruptions. Thus, it is tempting to ascribe potential volcanism in a minor role in future climate projections. However, over the past 2 millennia, there have been periods with considerably stronger volcanic activity. Clusters of strong tropical eruptions have contributed to sustained cold periods, such as the Little Ice Age. Okay, that's worth noting. A lot of volcanoes usually contributes to cooling.
Yeah.
Okay. Explosive volcanoes are omitted from scenarios from the CMIP 5 and 6 because they are unpredictable, as if everything else in the climate is predictable. Due to the direct radioactive effect of volcanic aerosol particles that reach the stratosphere, large volcanic eruptions lead to an overall decrease of global mean surface temperatures, which can extend to multi-decadal or even century timescales in the case of clusters of large volcanic eruptions. And yet, the International Panel on Climate Change, which is the United Nations group, we're going to get to them in a second, they say that it is likely that at least one large volcanic eruption will occur in the 20th century. So given this, does it matter that we see increased volcanic activity? That's an honest question that the media won't ask because it would lead to cooling. The Smithsonian Institution and the United States Geological Survey tracks volcanic activity. They provide this context about volcanic eruptions, and it's very confusing. So see the chart there clearly shows that volcanic activity has gone up in the last 100 years or so. But they say they don't see any evidence that volcanic activity is increasing, despite the chart below. They're saying, and then they say the apparent increase, look at the last highlight here, the apparent increase in activity reflects increases in populations living near volcanoes to observe them. So we just know more about it. Possibly true, right? But their tracking is trending up. And then look at this middle highlight. Readers are strongly cautioned against mistaking the record for the reality. Okay, then why are you, this is not reality? That's a weird thing to say, right? They're telling us they've measured this more volcanic activity, but that's not reality.
Don't look at the record. We're showing you the data points. I don't know why we're showing them to you. It's just a record, but don't use it as reality. Listen to our fake reality that we're about to paint for you.
Yeah.
That's what
strange,
how I read it.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. But we have had at least 2 major volcanic eruptions this week that we should be asking scientists about. Is this indicative of increased volcanic activity? Maybe could lead to cooling in these regions. Ask the question.
Well, we already have the data. I mean, again, fantastic book on this, The Year Without Summer from 1816, highlights the volcanic eruptions of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. And for the next 2 years, we saw dramatic shifts in climate and cooling as a result of the volcano in Indonesia. I mean, you had founding fathers writing about it in their diaries in North America, in the United States of America, about you had snow in the middle of summer across the United States at the time. People were saying we don't have crops. Corn all the way up through New England was not even growing. And it was a terrible, there was really concerns about famine. There was famine, actually. So we have the data points, and we know this then later, about 60 years later.
What we know is that increased volcanic activity leads to global cooling. What we don't know is, will scientists then surmise that maybe this could happen to us? Will you say maybe? They won't even say it because they're so worried about the globalists coming down on them as climate deniers.
I don't understand why they won't say it. We have I mean, it was speculated about in 1816.
No, it's not whether or not volcanic activity causes cooling. That's true.
Right.
It's whether or not it's happening now.
Oh, I see. Right. Despite the fact that, these massive volcanoes in Iceland and Japan.
Well, here's one in Iceland. How do you say this? Grimsvötn? This is, you see it written here? Grimsvötn. Volcanic activity in Iceland. Here's another one in Japan that formed a whole new island. That's fun to watch. I could watch that all day.
Oh, and this is great because anytime they form a new island in Japan, the United States then comes in and builds a military base on it. So the the Pentagon has got to be excited about this.
Maybe we built it ourselves.
Right.
Damn it, because I was gonna reach out to Japan and buy it, and I was gonna live there, but I guess
No, the Pentagon
base makes more sense.
Yeah, the Pentagon will beat you to it. As soon as Japan gets a new island, the Pentagon is there.
All right, so can we ask questions about how these things will affect global temperatures?
No.
Can we get honest answers?
No.
Not if the IPCC, the UN body, the United Nations body, has anything to say about it, because they are politicians, not scientists. Here is Dr. Willie Soon explaining this on Tucker Carlson. He is a Malaysian astrophysicist that has been studying climate for decades.
My view is that the UN IPCC, United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is one of the primary problems, which means they have been misleading people. They've been using authority of science, which is not true, right? It's all governmental hackers, basically, right? People like John Kerry, who I guess can barely take a proper physics class, who keep claiming that greenhouse effect is so simple, right? And then he refused to explain how does it work, right? I mean, he did all of that. That is very terrible. That really embarrassing to America.
Really embarrassing to America.
Very embarrassing. And then when John Kerry's daughter also shows up at the World Economic Forum and can't answer questions, that's even doubly embarrassing for America.
We're going to get to her. Now, because of his research that says that there can be natural explanations for climate variability, they accuse him of being funded by the fossil fuel industry. Here's the New York Times from 2015, accusing him of having doubtful origins of his funding. They have not, however, refuted his work. They're only attacking him. They're questioning his funding. Now, when globalists are asked to refute the fact that there can be natural explanations for climate variability, they just repeat alarmism and say, well, we'll have that data later. That is going to bear out. That's going to be true. Here is John Kerry's daughter, Vanessa Kerry, which Clayton just mentioned, saying this very thing at the World Economic Forum this week in Davos.
We are losing progress against our sustainable development goals. We have put billions of dollars towards those goals, and we're truly losing progress. We're now about to see the statistics of the deaths that we're seeing by 2050 is more than double what the statistics used to be. With all due respect to this WEF report, which is fantastic, we're still catching up on the data, which is the point that Cheryl is making about the urgency of getting that evidence so we can understand the problem we are truly up against.
Now, doesn't that sound like a cart before the horse to you? Like, we're trying to find the data to sell this to you as an emergency.
We're so panicked about it. We don't have the data yet, but we are panicked. And frankly, we're catching up. But we don't have the data yet to support the fact that we're being panicked.
Right. Things are doubling. I'm just going to use that doubling word.
But there's no data to support what you're saying. She says like the statistics, now 50% higher than the older statistics we had. But we don't have the data. We don't have the statistics. What the hell are you talking about?
Now, the data does show a warming period, again, without any evidence that humans have caused it. But aren't we naive to think that climate should stay any one way for maximum comfort? Judith Curry calls this the Goldilocks paradox. We should not expect that we can just keep the Earth just right by our standards. Here's what she says about that the climate scientists have implicitly adopted the premise that our climate was just right prior to human interference, measuring dangerous warming as the temperature changed since pre-industrial times. Pre-industrial is generally regarded as prior to 1750 and the start of the Industrial Revolution. So which climate do we want? As long as we're choosing the Goldilocks bed, few would choose the pre-industrial climate of the 18th century, which occurred during the Little Ice Age and was one of the coldest centuries of the last millennium. So just right for who, right?
Well, that's what Dr. Willie Soon pointed out in that. I would encourage all of you to watch that full interview on Tucker Carlson. It's one of the most eye-opening interviews I've ever seen. And he says they have pick an arbitrary number of what will be like the most comfortable temperature for us to live. He said, you go to the Sahara, you're in triple digits on a regular basis. You go to Siberia, you're in negative temperatures. Where is this like 1 degree variation, 2 degree variation that would make it so that everyone's living comfortably? Who's picking this number, and from what time period are you picking it?
And if we're manipulating, who gets a vote, right? Should people in Siberia say, yeah, I'd like it a little warmer? Or people in Africa say, well, I'd like it a little cooler.
We'd like a little cooler here, but I know you got all that snow up there.
Right.
So can we tilt the earth a certain way so that we're all happy?
So who are we trying to please? Now, you may ask, well, what does it hurt to just aim for a little more sustainability? Here's what Judith Curry says about that. When you prioritize sustainability over resilience, it means that you can no longer adapt. Advocates of adaptation to climate change are not arguing for simply responding to events and changes. They're arguing for anticipatory adaptation. And then we're not able to actually be resilient. She points out that Superstorm Sandy hit New York City hardest in the location where it was most recently redeveloped, which was Lower Manhattan, which should have been the least vulnerable part of the island. Why? Because it was rebuilt to be sustainable, not resilient, according to urban planners in the region. As a result, New York City demonstrated its fragility in the face of flooding and disruptions to the electricity grid. So what she's saying is that we should focus on just being adaptable to climate variability, not sustainability first. Now, we see this now in extremely cold places just this week where Teslas are bricked because the batteries can't charge in the cold.
Pierre Poilievre up in Canada with this massive cold snap, he was standing there speaking with supporters, and he's, all the truckers would have been totally out of luck because all these trucks wouldn't have been running if Trudeau gets his way running on electric trucks.
Right.
They would not work. They would not be functioning.
Yeah. So you wouldn't get your deliveries of food, basically. Cold is dangerous. Data shows that it causes 7 times more deaths than heat. We cannot lose our head because climate alarmists want us to ignore the needs of the most vulnerable who will freeze or die. If we experiment with their green initiatives, it must be humans first and then adaptation, but not sustainability first without the science. Judith Curry says that people who say follow the science are usually the ones who don't. They're the least studied, the ones who won't pick up a book. They'll just say, well, Anthony Fauci said this, so I follow the science because he's science. So we'll leave you with this quote from John Barry, historian and author of The Great Influenza. When you mix science and politics, you get politics. That's clearly what we've got when it comes to climate science and a complicit media that is incurious and unstudied. And to me, there's nothing worse than to be unprepared and unstudied. If they want us to trust them, they have to ask all the questions, even the ones that don't fit into their hysteria.
Yeah, there's great job. And there's a lot of unbelievable sound bites that have come out of the World Economic Forum this week on ecocide. One of my favorites was that nut job telling us that when you fish and you farm, that you are committing ecocide. Mm-hmm. That now that's why we've got to stop doing that. Great. I mean, there was a whole bunch of them. And then John Kerry being confronted about flying his private jet, his carbon footprint, coming here to lecture all of us about this. Yes, the hypocrisy was very, very thick this week. Yeah.
Well, the World Economic Forum
if you want to...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you.
I was just going to say, if you want to F around and find out on a global scale, stop farming. And just watch what happens, because we are so far and gone from being hunter-gatherers that if you stop farming, if you cease agriculture, we're all done.
Yeah, because people, well, certainly I know in the United States, they like to have their food as far removed from that process as possible. So when they go to the grocery store, you see the chicken wrapped in cellophane, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine forcing all of these people to try to do it themselves, right? We would be shit out of luck. What were you going to say?
I don't know. It's okay. I said a lot. We'll move on. We'll talk about the World Economic Forum more in the coming weeks, their agenda about meat, all of the above. But we have more news to get to. We're going to talk about this Israeli hostage situation, a mother who says that the Israeli government harmed her son. We have Dan Cohen coming up to talk to us about that. We're also going to talk about the Hunter Biden laptop story, where the Justice Department admits they have had it all along. They've been messing with it all along. So why did the FBI tell social media that it was a fake story? That's an unanswered question. Why did Joe Biden lie so much about it? That's so weird, right? So weird.
So strange. We'll get to all of that. But first, things are hard to predict in 2024. Social media trends, what cool new gadgets will be released, who's going to show up to your annual family reunion, all of that stuff. A new year is full of surprises. But one thing is predictable. Postage costs are going to go up again in 2024. That much? It's like death and taxes. You can count on it. But Stamps.com gives you crazy discounts of up to 89% off USPS and UPS services. So you'll barely notice any of this change in the costs going up if you use Stamps.com. Stamps.com has been helping businesses like yours save time and money for over 25 years. You are your own personal post office wherever you are. You don't have to wait in lines. And Stamps.com will let you print everything right at home. All you need is a computer and a printer. They'll even send you a free digital scale so you can measure and weigh your package right at home so you know exactly how much to print out, and then just drop it at the post office or have the post office pick it up at your house. So you don't have to go and wait in any lines. I love Stamps.com. And you're going to get 89% off those prices. And right now, also, you're going to get a nice free digital scale and no long-term commitment, no long-term contract, and a 4-week trial just for signing up for Stamps.com if you use our link. You have to use our promo code, though, Redacted, for that special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus a free postage and free digital scale, no long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on that little microphone that's at the very top of the screen, and then enter the code Redacted, and you will get that 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. Try it out right now. You're going to save a boatload of money on your postage this year. Even if you're not running a small business, it doesn't matter. This is just for your family. If you send packages, if maybe you've got like an eBay business or an Etsy business that you run from home as well, you can all take advantage of it by going to Stamps.com. Use that promo code Redacted to get all of those special benefits. Well, this week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the United States-backed war in Gaza would continue at least until the year 2025. So will anything be left at that point to go all the way into 2025? It'll just be an entire landing strip with nothing remaining. And what about the hostages, of course, that we've heard so much about? Well, a bombshell new report from the mother of an Israeli soldier who was killed back in December has revealed some startling details. And for that, we want to bring in Uncaptured Media's Dan Cohen with this unbelievable report. Dan, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be with you, Clayton.
So what did you find, and what did this mother say about her son? Again, this is her words, not ours, and it's remarkable.
Yeah, well, the mother of Ron Sherman, who was a 19-year-old Israeli soldier who was not a combat soldier, but was basically just manning a checkpoint at the northern entrance and exit of Gaza, the Erez crossing, which I've crossed through many times myself. When he was taken captive on October 7th, and it turns out, was held in a tunnel in a Jabalia refugee camp, kind of in the north of Gaza. And in December, the Israeli army announced that he was killed. They found his body along with 2 others that were kept in this tunnel. And they told the families that Ron Sherman and the others were killed by Hamas. And the families basically were so distraught. The mother, specifically of Ron Sherman, was so distraught that she didn't want to know the details. Now, a couple weeks later, a doctor who examined the body said, well, we didn't do an autopsy. We only did a CT scan. But what we found is that there was no sign of injury. There was no gunshot. There were no wounds, anything like that. And now Ron Sherman's mother, Maayan Sherman, has found out that he was actually killed by poison gas released into this tunnel by the Israeli military. She's been writing on Facebook. She's avoided the media so far, but she wrote on, and she was featured prominently in the media early on, talking about her son when he was alive. But now she's writing on Facebook, and she wrote, Ron was indeed murdered, not by Hamas. Think more in the direction of Auschwitz and the showers, but without Nazis and without Hamas as the cause. Not an accidental shooting, not friendly fire, premeditated murder, bombs with poisonous gas. She also adds that they also found he had several crushed fingers, apparently due to his desperate attempts to get out of the poison grave that the IDF buried him in when he tried to breathe air, but breathed only IDF poison. So
that's what she wrote.
That's what she wrote on Facebook. Exactly. So this young man was, in her words, she also wrote that he was sacrificed by the Israeli military, which basically, instead of negotiating the release of these captives and hostages, not only soldiers, but elderly and children, she's saying that the Israeli military has chosen to sacrifice them and sees them as an obstacle in the way of continuing this war for the years that Netanyahu wants to have ongoing war in order to stay in power, in order to avoid indictments on corruption charges. So that's why these hostages and captives, like Ron Sherman, are being gassed to death for Netanyahu's career.
So the doctor specifically, what did the doctor say in these results about the poison? Was he able to specify what type of poison it was? And has the Israeli army claimed responsibility for that, or are they being quiet about it?
They haven't said anything. The Israeli government, the Israeli military, the Ministry of Defense haven't said anything. There are no details from the doctor, and this is according to the mother. So we haven't actually, the autopsy is not public, but obviously it's a pretty trustworthy source from the mother, who believed what the army was saying up until this point, that Hamas had actually killed him.
These families, of course, have been protesting. They had been asking for answers. They've been hoping that their government would do something to get their boys back. How has the response been? What has been the response from the Netanyahu government about these Israeli captives?
Well, I published a lengthy investigation on how the Netanyahu government has basically run a psychological war against the families of the captives, who the overwhelming majority of the families of the captives and hostages want some kind of deal to bring their loved ones home, whether that's a full ceasefire, which is what Hamas's demand is, and then you exchange all prisoners from both sides, an all-for-all exchange, or some kind of negotiations to make this happen. For them, the number one priority, of course, is bringing their loved ones home. It's not as if some of them are prisoners of war, certainly, but there are many who were sleeping in their bed at 7 a.m. in their kibbutz and were taken, in their pajamas into Gaza. So this is not like regular war. So they have demanded that Netanyahu make a deal with Hamas, just like he made a deal with them in late November to get the first 100+ hostages and captives out. But instead, he has run a total psychological war. So back on October 15th, this is just a week into this whole thing, the families had been pressuring for a meeting with Netanyahu. He had ignored them. His national security chief, a guy named Tzaki Hanegbi, had said there will be no negotiations. So they were at their wits' end. And what he did is he brought them into a meeting last minute. And in that meeting, he put a couple of plants. He brought in plants to basically say, no, we don't want a ceasefire. We want we want to sacrifice our sons because it's for the good of the nation. And that caused a huge argument. And so Netanyahu basically brought in these plants, and one of them, so you have a couple of them who actually do have sons in Gaza who were taken captive, and they explicitly, these are like religious Zionist settlers who want to sacrifice their sons. In fact, we can play one of the sound bites from a guy named Tzvika Moore, who whose son is in Gaza to this day.
אמרתי לראש הממשלה שאני מאוד אוהב את הבן שלי, אחרי שהיו שם את הבכיות וצעקות והכל באמת קשה מאוד המעמד היה. אני אמרתי לכולם, גם אני מאוד מאוד אוהב את הבן שלי. אבל אם אני צריך לבחור בין הבן שלי, בין אהבת הבן שלי לבין אהבת האומה, אני בוחר באהבת האומה. אנחנו נשדר את החוזק. אנחנו עכשיו נקראים לדגל, ואם צריך להקריב את הקורבן, אנחנו נקריב את הקורבן.
I mean, that's a remarkable statement. That I'm just going to sacrifice my son. I just can't imagine the psychology of that. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, this is. I mean, to me, this is just straight up fascism. The idea that we have to sacrifice our children in order to basically destroy Gaza, steal land, commit genocide. And this Tzvika Moore, I have statements in my investigation of him saying explicitly genocidal statements where he says, "I've never understood better the why we have to kill Amalek." Amalek, which Netanyahu has also invoked, is a biblical nation that's like the enemy. That was the enemy of the Israelites, and the Israelites were commanded to kill this entire nation, the babies, the children, everyone. And Zionists, religious Zionists in particular, but also Netanyahu, has applied this to Palestinians, saying they're like a modern incarnation. And so Tzvika Moore goes and says, "I've never understood this idea better, because look what happens. You see this picture of a cute baby in Gaza," and he says, "of this baby Adolf," and then what does baby Adolf grow up to be? An adult Hitler. So he says, that's why we have to kill all of these babies, and I have to sacrifice my son who's in captivity in order to do that. So these are the people that Netanyahu is collaborating with and bringing in. And this was all organized through a settler terrorist NGO, the most prominent extreme right-wing, basically settler terrorist NGO in Israel, something called Hanenu. And there's an image that will show of Netanyahu embracing this guy who looks very sad and upset and about what's going on, and he's in the meeting with these families, but he doesn't even have a family member in Gaza. He doesn't have any captive or hostage family member. So how did he get in? It was all a coordinated plant job. And this guy is a total fanatic who is, he defends like legally. He gives money and gives legal. His NGO gives legal defense to terrorists who burn children alive in the West Bank, who commit heinous atrocities against Palestinians. So that's who Netanyahu is basically relying on and collaborating with in order to basically sacrifice all of the captives, all of the hostages in Gaza, and keep this war going as long as possible, even if it expands into Lebanon and, goes with, it's a war against Hezbollah that, he wants to drag the U.S. into. Basically, if this war ends, then Netanyahu's head is going to be on the chopping block. It's just a matter of time. Eventually, it's going to end. How many people are going to die? How many people are going to be sacrificed? Who knows? But, it's becoming increasingly clear to the families of the captives that Netanyahu, and not only Netanyahu, the whole cabinet around him, Benny Gantz, the former defense minister, who's considered more centrist, all of these people are lying to the families. And what they've actually been telling them all along is, the lie that they've been telling them is military pressure will get Hamas to release the captives. Well, that hasn't happened. Military pressure, if you just think about this, Clayton, objectively, military pressure, they're talking about bombing. Gaza is an extremely densely populated area, and you have captives and hostages in these houses, ostensibly with maybe used as human shields by Hamas fighters, maybe, and surrounded, kept with them, and they drop a 2000 bomb on that house. Well, that bomb is not going to discriminate between the Hamas fighter or any Palestinians and the captives.
Exactly. So
they basically just treat. Yeah,
I was going to say, who are these hostages that Israel has to exchange? Because the first round of exchanges included women and young boys, and Israel said They were prisoners, these women and young boys, but why? So who does Israel have to exchange at this point to get these people back?
I mean, Israel has roughly 5,000, maybe a little bit more, prisoners Palestinian prisoners. Many of them are held in what's called administrative detention, which is a concept held over from the British Mandate days, where they don't need charges. They just keep you in prison for for 6-month periods, renewed as much as they want without evidence. So in that sense, they are hostages too. They didn't commit any crime. They didn't do anything violent. They were just taken, from their beds and put into these Israeli prisons where they face horrific conditions, including torture, sexual assault, often these kinds of things. And this is not only they would be traded in an all-for-all exchange, and of course there are violent Palestinians who have committed acts of violence in there too. But for many Israelis, especially the families, it's worth the price. And for those who they say it's not worth it, well, they're stuck to this idea that we are in a permanent war, a permanent conflict with the Palestinians. But there's another element. Many of the families are starting to think bigger and say, wait a minute, is this worth the price? Is my son, my daughter, my uncle's life worth the price of living on the top side of this apartheid system? And for more and more Israelis, even though it's still a small amount, it's still very small numerically, but there is a consciousness that's starting to wake up to say, wait a minute, this is not worth it. We need to find some kind of actual peace, because we've lived by the sword for several decades. The entire history of the state of Israel has been by the sword, and Netanyahu has promised that we'll always be by the sword. And look where it's gotten us. Mm-hmm. We had October 7th. We have all the military power in the world. We have the U.S. backing us against this plucky little group in Gaza that's surrounded on all four sides. And look what they did. Look what they got away with. Look what they pulled off because of our own incompetence and maybe connivance from the top levels. So the faith in the establishment, not only in the politicians who many Israelis hate and think are clowns and idiots, but in the establishment, in the military, is being shaken for Israelis, and that was previously unthinkable. So that's really what they're accomplishing by sacrificing these hostages.
Wow, unbelievable. Unbelievable. And this mom I'll get you out of here on this, Dan. Is this mom in danger? I mean, she's saying things that are incredibly unpopular, I would imagine, within the Israeli government, using poison gas against their own soldiers, just indiscriminately attacking, and we're going to kill some of our own captives, our own hostages that are missing, that we're trying to get back, and that's just collateral damage at this point. Is she still there? Is she still in Israel?
Yeah, she's still there. I haven't seen anything to suggest that she's in any kind of physical danger or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. I did see she posted on Facebook that she had put a stone, like a marker, on her son's grave, saying that her son was abandoned and then sacrificed by the army, by the government. And as soon as she walked away and left that there, someone from the Ministry of Defense actually came and confiscated it. So she put it there with permission, and then it was stolen by the Ministry of Defense. So they really want to cover this up. This use of, what's, the other point I think that needs to be made very clear that I should have mentioned before, Clayton, is that this is the Hannibal Directive. This is not accidental when you're killing so many of your own hostages. Think back to the three captives who escaped and were walking in the middle of the street in mid-December, and they were walking shirtless and carrying a white flag, and they were shot dead by the Israelis, by the Israeli army. This has happened repeatedly. There were a few days ago, Itai Svirsky and Yossi Sharabi were also killed, and according to Hamas, they were killed by Israeli airstrikes. We don't know that for sure. We haven't seen proof, but it's very likely. Hamas has no incentive to kill them. So what people are figuring out in mostly these families is this is the Hannibal Directive. This is the Israeli military protocol that basically says we're going to kill. It was originally for captive soldiers, but we'll kill any Israeli in order to take away the enemy's leverage, so they cannot make us, have an exchange of any sort. So that's really what's going on here. This is the Hannibal Directive being implemented across the entire Gaza Strip.
Right, a government directive that if Hamas is holding Israeli soldiers or civilians, that doesn't matter. We will still bomb them. It doesn't matter that they're holding these individuals.
Yeah, and in fact, they're an obstacle, because if there's no hostages, if the hostages are killed, then the families don't have anything to protest for, to say, oh, well, there's still a chance of my kid coming out alive. Now that hostage is dead, too bad, the war's on. So, the hostages are really the obstacle, and the families are really the obstacle for Netanyahu to keep this war going until, 2025, 2026, whatever he wants.
It's unbelievable, but not surprising at all, because these parents, of course, these families are incredibly inconvenient to have them protesting in front of the government, calling on Netanyahu to step down, try to get our sons and daughters back that are being held captive. But it makes more sense for them to just, I guess, to kill them, to deal with them. This is where we are in 2024. Dan Cohen from Uncaptured Media, thank you so much. You can watch Dan's full report on his website, and you can follow him on X as well. Dan, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Clayton.
All right, thanks so much, Dan. We appreciate it. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look at the Hunter Biden laptop story. Oh, man, Miranda Devine, the woman who broke the story about the Hunter Biden laptop in the New York Post, was exploding last night because of the admissions of the Department of Justice. Oh, they've had the laptop all along? They're finally admitting all of this? Will they issue a correction? Will mainstream media, Rachel Maddow, issue a correction on all of this? Probably not, but we'll get to the details of this.
The president himself?
Yeah, maybe he
wants to issue a correction?
Maybe.
All right, we're going to look at that. But first, let us tell you about our friends over at the Wellness Company. Of course, as you know, the government's goal is for you to depend on them and control our lives. Close to 90% of pharmaceuticals in the U.S. are produced outside of the United States. So what happens when the next global crisis hits? Of course, you're going to want to be ready as the price of medications rise. Pharmacy shelves in America continue to empty out, but not if the Wellness Company has anything to do with it. They want you to be prepared. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit holds 8 life-saving medications that every American should keep in their medicine cabinet. It's like having a doctor at home. The kit contains antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitics, medicines like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, plus 22-page guidebook with instructions on safe usage. So it's better than what some people do, like crossing certain borders to get medication that they don't know how to use. You can use it safely and have a safe stock for your family. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. These prescription emergency kits are in huge demand right now. So to get yours and to find out more about it, head on over to twc.health/redacted. Use our code redacted to save 10% at checkout. Be safe, be prepared, and stay well. These kits are only available in the USA. Again, the URL is twc.health/redacted. Well, more proof that the Hunter Biden laptop is real, it's authentic, and the Justice Department knew it all along. They had it. Before that, they even had a backup to it. This all comes from Justice Department filings. While we await apologies, the silence is loud. Here are some people that maybe I'd like an apology from. President Biden, who called the story Russian disinformation. We're going to bring you footage of that just to jog your memory. The media that said that the story was Russian disinformation. Twitter, or X, which censored the story. Facebook, which censored the story. Mark Zuckerberg, I would love an apology from him. Liberals who willfully ignored it and attacked the whistleblowers who have kept this investigation going. I have a long list. I have a list of people. Just one person on that list. Apologize, please. So here is the thing. Hunter Biden is a mess. He is a mess, and the Justice Department is not holding back in their investigation under Special Counsel David Weiss. Now, Miranda Devine was the New York Post reporter who first broke this story before the 2020 election. She was raked over the coals about it. She posted about this on X, and I want to show you what she's pointing out because she is a dog with a bone, and I am here for it. Here is what she shows from the Justice Department's filing, showing that they knew the laptop was legit all along. And furthermore, before they had the laptop, they had a backup from Hunter Biden's iCloud that they obtained from a warrant from Apple. So they almost didn't even need it because they got a backup of everything so they were investigating this guy for a long time. And they had this. These are, by the way, I just have to say it. These are her underlines. They're not mine because
I would use a ruler. You would use a ruler.
I kind of can't take it. But nevertheless, they're important, the things that she wants us to see here. So we'll just leave that.
But by the way, that's a digital underlining. She's using like an Apple Pencil.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So just give her some leeway there.
Absolutely. Okay. Can we put it back up one more time? Look at the date here, September 2019. Now, I would like to remind you that in October of 2020, the FBI, through Special Agent in San Francisco, Elvis Chan, reached out to Twitter and Facebook and told them that this laptop story would be fake. But they'd had it for a year and been investigating it. So why would Elvis Chan have done that?
That is unbelievable.
Why did he do that? Who told him to do that? Now, later he explained in this deposition that he did last year, he was deposed over the federal government censoring COVID, the case that's brought by the states of Louisiana and Missouri. Here's his deposition. And he said, well, the government shares information that we decide is critical. But does that include lies?
Right. So wait, we share information that we think is critical. So we have a laptop. We've confirmed the authenticity of it. We're actively creating a narrative and going to Mark Zuckerberg and social media companies and telling them that it's a fake story and to censor news articles.
We're making stuff up.
Yeah.
We made up a lie and we are sharing through their practice of social media sharing. We're sharing a lie that we made up. Now, I know the FBI is allowed to lie in order to get information, but was that part of their investigation that they needed to go out of their way to lie, to censor the story? How does that further an investigation?
Right. And by the way, what has their investigation yielded in the way of prosecution? Right. What has their massive investigation to the point where they went to the American people and lied and arguably swayed an entire election?
Right.
And they still haven't done shit.
Yeah.
So what did this lead to?
Well, no, they're doing shit right now.
Now they are.
Yes, they're
Okay.
indicting Hunter Biden up the yin-yang for what we're going to show you, at least. I mean, clearly there's more to indict Hunter Biden
But here's what I don't get. It's the indictment is because of the evidence from the laptop. So that
Right.
to go out and lie about its authenticity and the veracity of what's on it, or that it's even existing, and then to say the opposite, that it's fake and that it's a lie. You already have the information on the laptop that you've backed up. You have the data points to
Right.
know these transactions, what's going on here, the foreign business dealings.
Yeah, I've never seen any explanation for why Elvis Chan did that. Why did he go and give Twitter and Facebook a heads up that this story would be fake when they had possession of the laptop? I don't know. But let's look more at this indictment or this. This is part of many indictments. It's the filings that the Justice Department made this week. They want to rewind to 2018. They say October 12th. Here's where he went and bought this laundry list of things related to guns, this revolver, and then these accessories, if you will, to the revolver. The purchase was on October 12th. Now, when he made this purchase, he had to fill out a federal form that asked if he was an unlawful user of drugs, and he answered no. He admits that had he answered yes, he would not have been allowed to make those purchases. Later that day, the Justice Department so he answered no, I'm not an addict, but then later that day, he used his phone to take pictures of crack cocaine and drug paraphernalia. That's what they saw. They saw pictures dated later that day. The next day, on October 13th, he met a drug dealer named Mookie. Here's where it talks all about Mookie. Said, I met him behind a sports stadium to buy drugs. This is by his own admission, text to his girlfriend. And then later he texts her that he had slept in his car smoking crack. In fact, he continues within those days, October 12, 13, and 14, he continues to text people about all the drugging that he's up to. In one text, he declares, I'm an effing better man than any man you know, whether I'm smoking crack or not. So at least he knows that he's an addict. Like, I guess he thinks he's a functional addict, right? Clearly, he's, I don't want to say he's peaking. He's at high impact addiction here, because who knows if he's peaked? Who knows if he's come down? I don't know that. And addicts lie. That's to be expected, but it's still a crime to lie on a federal form and get a gun. And the drugs and the gun were not sold separately, if you know what I mean. Here's where the Justice Department says, last year we went and pulled that gun out of a vault and we looked at it, and investigators literally found drugs on the pouch where the defendant had kept his gun. So he didn't have like an organizer where you hold your gun and your
Wait a minute.
drugs.
You're going to criticize a crack addict for not being as organized as you are with like spreadsheets.
Well, it's like, you know, my kids' backpacks where I see crumpled papers at the bottom and I'm like, you have a folder for this. Why is this here? You know, it, like he just threw it all in the same place. Like, here's some crack cocaine.
Imagine that a crack addict's not organized.
Yeah.
I would expect him to be more organized.
So he had some cocaine on the drugs. Now, it's interesting, though, because white substance was found at the White House last year. Right? That's interesting.
How'd that get there? By the way, we still don't know.
No, they never were able to conclude.
We have cameras everywhere, and we know who checks in and who checks out of the White House, but we can't figure out how cocaine got in the White House.
So strange.
And especially after the safety protocols that were put in place after the alleged anthrax attack back during the Obama years.
Right.
So, or, you know, how was anthrax being winding up in the hands of people who worked at the White House?
Are they worried that more, you know, dangerous substance might just show up?
Well, you would think.
You would think, right? And then, of course, the whole crime to cover it up, we just don't have answers or apologies. For instance, maybe someone should ask Jen Psaki, who told you to say that the laptop was Russian disinformation? Where did that come from? Because here is her saying just that.
The president has said, and you have tweeted, that allegations of wrongdoing based on files pulled from Hunter Biden's laptop are Russian disinformation. There's a new book by a Politico reporter that finds some of the files on there are genuine. Is the White House still going with Russian disinformation?
I think it's broadly known and widely known, Peter, that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020.
Okay, she's saying that. Doesn't that make her a person of interest in this case?
But no, a person of interest to get an MSNBC television show. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah. He asked a specific question, like, are you still sticking with that this was Russian disinformation? What she just did there was she said, it's well known that there was a lot of Russian disinformation.
Right.
Like, that's not answering the question.
Back in the day, it was well known.
Right. She just says everybody knows that.
But not about the laptop. She just said we know there was a lot of Russian disinformation. That's like the softest, like that is not an answer. She just avoided the question.
Yeah. She totally avoided the question. And she knows, and maybe she now knew that, oh, no, this thing is real. So I can't answer it directly. I can't say directly that was the case. That, in fact, back then, there was a lot of well-known Russian disinformation around there.
That's right. So let's also see Joe Biden saying the same thing.
What about the Americans who really today only want me to ask you about Hunter Biden's laptop? How are you going to get them to see that you are fighting for them when they're so dead set against you?
There's nothing to any of that. Nothing to any of that. It's all a smear. Every major outfit, every serious investigator has pointed out that this is a smear. This is classic Trump. We had 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. And you may recall, there's also talk about 4 months before there was a similar thing that somebody had, allegedly. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged. I mean, look, my son's an honorable man.
Okay.
You want to walk that back?
He should be deposed. He should have to answer for the fact that he felt like he knew, right?
Yeah.
He knew that it was disinformation.
Or were you completely duped by your son? Is your son just telling you what he thought you wanted to hear? Dad, there's nothing there. Don't worry about it. There's no laptop. They're just trying to smear me. They're trying to smear you right before the election. You're surrounded by sycophants in the White House who are all telling you one thing.
No, this is 4 days before the election that he said this. And he's saying definitively that this is nothing, right? So how does he know that? How does he know? I mean, I guess you can just say, well, he's a duped father of an addict and he didn't get the truth, but he's telling the American people that there's nothing there. So either he owes us an apology or or he should be investigated for what he knew. This, again, is the most formal proof that we have so far that the Justice Department always knew that the laptop was legitimate and that they were working off of it for an investigation all along. So there's a lot of people that should apologize for this. Let us know what you think of it.
Yeah, let's see if anyone apologizes. Let us know in the comments. Who do you think should apologize? And will we get anywhere with this? And how long do you think that Hunter Biden should be put away for, by the way? Will he get anything other than a slap on the wrist here? Probably.
Well, I mean, these filings continue, and it's clear that they're not done. They're not done with what they're going to accuse him of.
Well, yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Thank you guys so much for subscribing and being part of our community here. We do have a Redacted Plus Club. It's free right now to watch our show. You don't have to pay anything to watch us on Rumble, on YouTube, on X, where we stream every day. So thanks to the tens of thousands of you who watch us every day. And we really appreciate it. But if you want to join in the conversation and support independent journalism, we have a Redacted Plus Club where we release interviews, exclusive content to you that no one else gets to see, and also content that's released to you early. For instance, interviews that people will see maybe a few days later. You get to see them before anyone else. Also access to our specialty live streams and our different clubs that we're launching as well. So go to Redacted Plus right now. It's just go to redacted.inc as the website, and then click on the join the community. And for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism, support what we do here. That's our private Redacted Plus Club at redacted.inc. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here on this this week. We've got content this weekend. We've got some really important interviews coming out this weekend that we want you to see as well, part of that redacted conversation that we've been talking about. And we will be back live streaming on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So please set your clock. Join us at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, wherever you are around the world. We'd love to see you guys, and have a great weekend. We'll be back here next week. Have a great one, everyone.